Alrighty. Okay, Cris, we are ready. And again, to everyone, now that we are recording, this session is our Farm Bill panel discussion. And we are starting with Cris Stainbrook, who's the president of the Indian Land Tenure Foundation. Thank you for being on. Sorry for the late notice and the 2 times. And I emailed Cris and he said, what time? I go, now. So he jumped on. Thank you, Cris.
Well, I had 2 times. I had a much later one, and I was thinking, oh, I got plenty of time. And my farm manager was on me about doing some farm work this morning. She's actually my wife as well. And so there's a certain urgency about it. Our snow melted this morning, and now it's spring, right? So the first thing I would say to the group is the foundation typically doesn't work on the Farm Bill in a broad sense. We have been involved in the past, I guess the past 3 farm bills, but on very specific issues. And before we worked on issues related specifically to land for our Indian farmers and ranchers. So the highly fractionated loan program, we had a part of that. And in fact, we went through 2 farm bill cycles with that just to get it to where it is now. And we may be trying to get some changes to that as we go forward to make it more useful. A few years ago, some folks talked us into setting up a fund for the FERTEP programs at the foundation. Sounded like a great idea, and it actually has been. Don't let me be negative about it, because the only issue we have is it's a much bigger part of our work than what we thought it would be when we started, and it's a good thing that it is. It's there are just some frustrating times with some of it, but I think we're getting to the point where we've got all that worked out now, and it's moving along. We received some funding to do some FERTEP work through the Native American Ag Fund, as well as through the Keeps Eagle settlement. And that has really provided some extra resources for the FERTEP programs, but it also, the Native American Ag funding really got us to a point where we began looking at the Farm Bill and how we could help NIFA get more in the budget for the FERTEP agents and expand the FERTEP program to something that's much more realistic than the limited number of FERTEP agents we currently have in the field. And in doing that, we provided resources out for the ripple effects mapping that all of the FERTEP programs went through, which collected some basic information about what types of programs they were providing, what does it look like in terms of outreach to the community. And the other component to that, which the ripple effects mapping fed into, was a commission on the 21st century FERTEP and what should that look like. And Trent and Joanne Warner helped the foundation out in really ramrodding the commission and getting some folks rounded up and functional on the commission. We put it on a tight timeline so that everyone could stay engaged in it, as opposed to having long periods of time between meetings and not getting the information in. We now have the report, and the report will be issued shortly, within probably next week or early the week after. And we will make sure that it gets out very broadly from the commission. I will tell you, I'll give you a few of the highlights to it, and it's really the long and short of it is to increase the tribal extension funding through the FERTEP program, as well as the tribal colleges, do an increase of about 49 million a year in the funding. Go from roughly 35 programs that are funded now to at least adding upwards of 90 more agents, and having some regional specialists, about 27 regional specialists to supplement the activities of the FERTEP agents. And in recognizing that the universities, the land grant universities will stay involved, there are extended funds for their administrative costs. There are a number of other recommendations. I won't go into them now, but those recommendations we hope to get into the Farm Bill. We'll have the report, as I say, then we'll have some ancillary materials, which Trent has been very aggressively putting together. And then the other thought that occurred to me, we just got done with our annual conference, and a number of people from the feds, we said, well, why don't you hold a webinar on this topic? And we were told 3 times, well, we can't, but you can. And I got to thinking about that relative to this expansion of FERTEP. And I think, and I'll touch base with a number of the people who are on the commission, but I think what we may try and do is a series of webinars targeting specific parts of the program market, if you will. So do one with agents to explain this is what's being proposed, do one with university administrators, do one with the current extension directors at the various places, and even the upper administration of the universities. And that way we can start building support for this before we get into the final discussions around the Farm Bill. I guess I would stop there and see if people had questions, or I can wait until after Bret goes.
Yeah, so we want this to be interactive, so ask questions as we go. I also want to maybe refer to Trent if you have anything to add to what Cris said.
No, it was a short
part of the
timeline.
commission. Yeah, I was part of the commission. I know this was a very arduous task that was undertaken by Trent, Cris, and Joe, and so Joe Hiller, and the rest of us just were the reviewers and oftentimes the critics. And so it's exciting because, you know, we can't move forward without trying, and it's a big undertaking, but I think we had a great team that was put together, the right team at the right time. So we are hoping for that. Any questions right now? Otherwise, we will leave some time at the end for questions. Oh, Maureen.
Yeah, Cris, once this report is out, or officially out, I should say, are you gonna, and maybe you'll cover this in the webinars, but it would be nice if we knew from the outside how we can support this effort. So, you know, how do you want us to go about, you know, providing letters of support, making contacts on behalf of this, all those sorts of things. It would be nice if the groups collectively can find ways to get the word out and support your efforts.
Well, I think that would be the appropriate conversation to have in the webinars with the folks who are there.
Okay.
And get to a point where we've got a pretty good understanding of who's heard of the commission's reports and what issues, other issues may come up during some of these webinars that we'd like to address, and have that in there. But certainly the point of the webinars will be to engender support and get it out there and get it from the different kind of layers of FERTEP, if you will. And right. So that people are clearly addressing that layer they're on with political officials and others, because we have a person in DC who was hoping we would be able to get on the call today, but he's busy with some other things. And we can use him to help arrange some educational sessions, if you will, with elected officials and their staff. And then we'd be having, you know, very specific folks that we would want to have, let's say, the university professor or university presidents target. We'd have some folks that we'd want the FERTEP agents to target and like that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been doing is explaining to people who haven't had as much engagement in Indian country in the research world, the value of tribal extension, whether it's the FERTEP program or the 1994s, and touting that as one of the, that is an invaluable asset of people on the ground, and it substantially expanding this program, particularly FERTEP, past the initial engagement, the initial 35 projects would hugely improve the ability for two-way communications in more communities. And so I think from our perspective, we couldn't have done anything in Native waters without both FERTEP and the 94s. And I'd like a chance to be able to say that to the people who are, putting pen to paper on the bill.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we found in the ripple effects mapping, we thought we would have these nice, concise maps that we could, put into the documents and stuff. The ripples going out they reach so far that these maps are unprintable. You go, holy cow, what are we going to do with this? And I think we're considering, can we get it up on an electronic version where people can go in and actually see these comments, and
Right.
where you had these well beyond agriculture influences even, or traditional agriculture. I mean, it's way beyond that. And
Yeah, there's actually behavioral changes in there that are documented.
Yep. And if you see opportunities somewhere that we're missing, I would hope you would pass that along.
I certainly will. Thanks, Chris.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, let's go to Bret Hess. He works for the University of Nevada, Reno, but maybe more importantly, I'm not sure, but he's the director of Western Extension Directors Association. And so when I talked to Chris and Bret on this, I kind of just said, go over some programs that are going to affect Indian country or that are being proposed, just like Chris was talking about. So with that, and Bret is kind of on the AHEC side. We were unable to get Carrie Billy on, but Bret, I think, has us covered. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Bret.
Thanks, Vicki. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to see many of you. Well, all of you, of course, but not all of you have your video on. So great to see all of you. Yeah, I'm the executive director for the Western Association of Agricultural Experiment Station Directors. We represent the research branch of colleges of agriculture associated with land-grant universities throughout the West. But I also serve as the executive vice chair of the Experiment Stations section, the leadership group that supports the national system of agriculture experiment stations. The reason that I mention that is we are one of several sections, so representing research, that contribute to the Farm Bill conversations that are hosted by the Board on Ag Assembly in the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities. Okay, and so I will be presenting to you what the experiment station section is going to be recommending being included in the Farm Bill, as that may directly or indirectly affect Indian country. And then I'm also going to highlight some of the other areas that are being brought forward on behalf of the 1994 institutions who also hold a seat on our Farm Bill committee. Let me just explain one other thing before I launch into some of these priorities, and just briefly mention, because I think you all are aware, we use the term land grant. I just want to establish a couple terms, because I'm going to be throwing years out, and these years are the dates, the year in which Congress passed a legislation that was signed by a president that established a certain type of land grant university. 1862 was the first moral act. So I will most likely refer to the 1862s. Those are the colleges of agriculture that I specifically represent. Yes, my position is hosted at the University of Nevada, Reno, but I work on behalf of the whole system. And then the second is the second moral act. It was signed into law in 1890. 1890 represent the historically Black universities, colleges of agriculture, 1890. And then the last one that you've already heard, the 1994s, that particular group of land grants, of course, represent tribal colleges and universities. And that act was signed into law. The act that was signed into the law is called Equity in Educational Land Grant Status Act. Okay, so I just want you to be aware, I may be using years or numbers like 1862, 1890, and 1994. I want to give you that definition before I launch into that. And then I think all of you are most likely aware, but just real quickly, the Farm Bill authorizes, and so you're going to hear me use terms like reauthorize or authorize a new authorization. And basically what that means is if what I'm about to present is included in the Farm Bill, basically that just gives Congress an opportunity to fund it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be funded, because there's a couple other processes that occur later through appropriations. So this is just that language that says you have the ability, because we believe these are important programs, to fund them, and the appropriators have to make that decision later, okay? So I just wanted to go through that. Sometimes it's a confusing process. So I've got comments, again, on behalf of the experiment station section that may be relevant, and then I'm going to move into some of the specifics that are coming forward on behalf of the 1994s. Starting with, and this is relevant, I know Josiah had to jump off, but this one is relevant, first of all, in that the experiment stations would like to see language that encourages regional food system components of national food security in competitive programs that are included in the Farm Bill. And then one other thing that is semi-related to that is in the 2018 Farm Bill, the USDA ARS was directed to develop and implement a national strategic germplasm and cultivar collection assessment and utilization plan. And specifically that takes into consideration the resources and research necessary as a self-internal evaluation activity. Now, several of these national plant germplasm stations, they're basically gene banks, are on land grant campuses and have other affiliations. So consequently, the idea is there needs to be significant consultation on the human and physical infrastructure necessary to improve these joint programs. And the reason I bring that forward is these are, again, gene seed banks where historic samples can be stored of seeds that affect food production. So we'd like to see that continued to be highlighted in the 2023 Farm Bill. Infrastructure, I think maybe at one point Jeff Jacobson may have explained to this group the interest in the experiment station sections focus on research facilities. And so just a quick explanation. In 2015, we commissioned a study to evaluate the healthiness of our infrastructure, research laboratories, and associated facilities. That study was refreshed in 2020 and a report was released that indicated that the system of land grant universities And this study involved 90% of the land-grant university and colleges of agriculture with research programs. So very expansive study. It demonstrated that the deferred maintenance cost in 2020 for the system of land-grant and non-land grant colleges of agriculture, deferred maintenance cost was $11.5 billion. Now, there is a Research Facilities Act that is authorized currently at $700 million. It has not been appropriated since any funds have not been appropriated since 1997, I think. And so the idea is to include language that gets us closer to authorizing that huge bill that we're currently sitting on for infrastructure. And any other parts of the Farm Bill that could do this singularly, like through the Research Facilities Act, or in partnership, for example, with ARS or NRCS. Some other things, key areas that are of interest is matching and where possible, put language in that would allow the secretary to either waive match or be more direct and where it's possible, and just eliminate the matching requirements. So that includes, in the case of the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, the Research Facilities Act I already just mentioned with the infrastructure, and more specifically directly for tribal communities is to remove and modify the current 100% match requirement for the new beginnings for tribal students grants. And you'll hear me mention that again. So reauthorization and authorization areas that may indirectly affect Indian country, but are very significant to the experiment station section, is support for research and extension activities in several titles. The Title 8, Forestry, Title 9, Energy, Title 10, Horticulture, and Title 12, Miscellaneous for McIntyre Stennis. McIntyre Stennis provides capacity funds for forestry programs and was extended in the last Farm Bill to include 1994 universities. So the tribal colleges and universities that have forest programs are eligible to receive these formula capacity funds too. And the direction, some of the language would be to have an eye on growing and processing crops for biofuels, carbon sequestration, climate mitigation and adaptation, renewable energy systems, expanding farmers markets, local food programs with research and infrastructure, grow and expand beginning socially disadvantaged workforce respectively. So many of the items that would have either a direct or indirect bearing on Indian country. On one thing on the, oh yeah, go ahead.
One sec, just some comments from Aaron.
Oh.
Aaron, do you want to, just as examples? So Aaron.
Oh yeah, Bret, thanks for sharing. Much appreciated. I think people in this group would, if you maybe just defined the difference between authorized versus appropriated, you mentioned it. I think that's not defined enough for this group of people, but also, yeah, last 2021 matching was a big issue for tribal consultation. I appreciate that that's on your radar. That's great. Creating a lot of issues with some programs, and I just popped in there that SKC, CLH Kootenai and Leech Lake both have the McIntyre Stennis program. So that was it. It was just commentary as you talk. Really, I didn't need to interrupt you. Sorry.
No interruption is good, especially for clarification. Yeah, just to reemphasize, there is a huge difference between authorization and appropriation. So again, authorization is what is done in the Farm Bill process that basically directs Congress on what limits there might be or programs that are eligible for funding. And then annually there's an appropriations process. So just because something is included in the Farm Bill doesn't mean that it's going to be funded. It has to be appropriated. That's a totally separate process that occurs annually. The Farm Bill is on a 5-year cycle, and it just says, here's programs that are important that Congress says we will put money towards if the appropriators decide to do so on an annual basis. Okay, so on the cooperative extension side of things that may have a more direct bearing, they're seeking reauthorization of beginning farmer and rancher development programs. And here again, remove match. So you'll hear remove matching in a lot of cases. On the academic program side of things that are of interest is the multicultural scholars, graduate fellowship, and institutional challenge grants. The idea here is to not only reauthorize, but set the ceiling from 400 million to 800. I'm sorry, I misspoke. 40 million to 80 million. And so here's an example of what is considered a definite level of funding that's that's suggested in a Farm Bill. In this particular case, they've reached the 40 million authorized level. And so the appropriators shouldn't be going beyond what is already authorized in the Farm Bill for a definite amount of funding. And so the idea is let's double what is currently in the Farm Bill so that program can grow. And so there's actually 6 lines that are authorized in that, and the programs of interest again are related to the multicultural scholars and the institutional challenge grants that might be developed to support tribal students. And then regarding the experiment station's focus here, but in support of the 1994 institutions, we are going to seek to eliminate the mandate that requires 1994 collaborations on research grants. Currently, research grants that are authorized in the Farm Bill require collaboration either between the 94 and 1862, 1890, USDA, ARS, or other institutions with approved forestry programs. So we've heard a lot about how that can be hampering, and it's kind of a forced collaboration. We'd like to see that more natural and not have it mandated in a Farm Bill. And then,
so that would mean, Bret, so that would mean that the funding can go entirely to the 94s. Is that correct?
Yeah, and not force a collaboration. I think, and
The funding can go 100% to the 1994s. There is a forced collaboration.
It's a forced collaboration. So the funding currently is eligible to go completely to the 94s, but only if there's a collaboration with those institutions that I mentioned.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
And thanks, Aaron, for clarifying that too. And then the other one is mentioned that the 94s have ability, if they have a forestry program, to receive McIntyre Stennis. And so we'll be seeking to increase that total allocation since there'll be more players at the table with the inclusion of the 1994s. Now let me move into some specific items for the 1994s that the system at whole is supporting. Okay, payments to the 1994 Education Equity Grants Program. So this is the academic program side of the house. This is a definite program right now. We're seeking to change that to indefinite, and that would mean the language that says such sums as necessary. That such sums as necessary language eliminates the cap on the funding. Okay, so that's one thing. And that's the case for The 1994 institution research grants, same thing. And as well as the extension service grants for 1994s. In all case, include language that says such sums as necessary, so there's not going to be a cap on those. And then there isn't an endowment, a 1994 endowment. Aaron is responsible for administering that on behalf of NIFA. This is an interest-bearing account, and Congress appropriates that annually. And so basically, the allocation to land grants is based on student numbers, Indian or Native American student numbers, as well as the amount of funds that are in that. The good thing about this fund, in a way, is there's no restrictions once it's allocated for its use. The president of the university can use it for anything that is necessary to support their institution at their discretion. And so obviously interested in reauthorizing that particular program. Reauthorization of the New Beginnings for tribal students, I've already mentioned, and then of course eliminate the match. There's outreach and assistance for socially disadvantaged and veteran farmers and ranchers, section 2501. And there's in section C, the 94s are going to be asking to change the language. And currently the language is an Indian tribal community college or Alaska Native cooperative college, to the new language, an Alaska Native or Native American serving institution of higher education. So it'd be a little more expansive on and inclusive in that language. Couple of
Brett,
yeah, go ahead.
Just can I get a clarification on that? So by Native American serving, so that means 94s and 1862s with that designation, correct?
That could be correct for those that have FERTEP programs by that broader definition.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Question.
Yeah.
You were just talking about these endowments with, have they always been there with like the land grant universities like at UNR?
No, this is specific an endowment for the 1994 universities and colleges.
So does that mean they're only for the tribal colleges?
Only for the tribal colleges and universities.
How do we get them done at the other ones?
Well, that would require a whole new authorization and influx of funding.
Okay, well, we want that at UNR.
Right? I think there's others that would want that too. Let me just cover two new programs that are on the radar.
Okay, hold on. We have one more question.
I'm sorry. I can't see everybody on my screen.
No, it's okay. It's in the chat. It's from Phil at FEMA. And is there a link to the annually appropriated funds grant specific to the Farm Bill so one can see what is currently funded to apply for?
Yes, and I'm going to kick that back to Aaron, because I think that you can find many of these programs that are administered through NIFA. You can find what the level was authorized and what the level of funding is available every year. So hopefully Erin heard that, because I'm going to let her follow up with you, Vicki, on where those numbers can
and
be
we'll
gained.
send that out. Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And okay, two new authorizations, and that is that they're seeking is a tribal colleges and universities IT service fund. They're wanting to include authorization level of $24 million. And this is to support broadband funding to connect 1994s with state and regional networks within rural development, rural utility service, and waive any matching. Okay, so it's basically broadband for the 1994s. And then in addition, to what I mentioned with the infrastructure that the experiment stations are seeking, there is a request to include a 1994 construction program, new authorization, $500 million, and of course to support 1994 facility construction. Okay, and then there's I'm not done. I do have a couple more programs. Another new authorization program, and this is a 1994 scholarship program. So the 1890s have a scholarship program for the historically Black college students. This would be for the 1994s that they currently don't have. And so I think, Vicky, other than a few changes to tweak language, name changes, adds and deletes, that's all that I have. So it looks like I managed to finish up and use up all that time that you allotted. It was longer than 10 minutes. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bret. Okay, any questions for Bret or Cris at this time? Or any additional comments, Cris?
No, it's interesting though. I'm more used to dealing with the Department of Interior's budget process, and I'm trying to sit here and reconcile that with USDA's, right? And we went through this budget process at DOI, and they cut several programs that we thought were fairly important. And then the president's budget comes out, what, a week and a half later, and puts one of them back in higher than Department of Interior had it. And so the question really becomes, how do you, I don't understand the federal budget processing, and I'm not even going to try, I guess.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, and I severely oversimplified the process.
Well, yeah.
There's a lot that goes on up until what I had mentioned.
Maureen?
Yeah, Bret, are you comfortable with us sharing your email for folks who may have follow-up questions to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, and Cris, same? Yeah. Vicky, can you put that in the follow-up notes?
Yeah,
that'll be really
absolutely.
helpful. That was really helpful, Bret. You guys are doing a fabulous amount of work, and thank you for taking a lot of those comments. I'm really relieved to hear things like the dropping the matching fund requirements and other things like that are, the increased funding is one thing, but making the funding that's there more accessible is really important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both.
Vicky,
Cris, what?
Vicky,
Yeah.
And I know Josiah left, but Trent's question around, can you get vehicles like refrigerated vehicles? Are they would it be allowable under the program to pay a lease or a mileage rate on vehicles under the programs that they have?
Yes, it is allowable.
Trent, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say thank you.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this, and thank you for interjecting comments, and Aaron for your extra contributions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but I want to thank both Bret and Cris for being on today. I realize we boxed you in this tiny short period of time, but I think that it feels good to know what's going on. One of the things we strive to do with this group is keep everyone informed instead of being told what is going to be done in a farm bill. So it feels good to be part of the process and part of those decisions as they are being made. And a special thanks to Trent too for that budget, and Cris on that. I want to remind everyone, in May, we are going to have Kyle with the Montana Climate Office. He's the Director of Climate Extension Services. He's going to give us our update on how our summer is going to look. So, prayers are, are welcome right now. And then I sent this out incorrectly. In June, we have Carletta Chief, and she is doing her Indigenous Resilience Center, which we just saw her down at SWIA, and it's, or not her, but her assistant, and it was incredible. So I'm excited for that. And then in July, we have Sharon Small, and this is a CDFI on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. And it caught my eye, not only because my daughter works for them in the summer when she's up in Montana, but they just took a grocery store that closed down in Ashland, Montana, and reopened it under the CDFI. It's called the People's Partners for Community Development. And they have this beautiful grocery store where they're trying to source locally and, fruits and vegetables, fresh food, to kind of avoid that food desert. And so I'm excited for all of us to hear her story in July as well. So with that, hold on, I think we have a question.